Welcome to the Middle Ages, a podcast hosted by two women in midlife navigating the wild, liberating, and often hilarious realities of this chapter of life. With a mix of insight, irreverence, and real talk, they explore everything from changing bodies and shifting identities to evolving relationships, work, and purpose. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's a whole new beginning.
Hi.
Hello, hello. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed. It's sunny out. I think this might be our last day of sun until next June. We're supposed to have an atmospheric river this weekend.
I totally missed that weather prediction. I'm gonna try to bypass it and just send something more positive into the atmosphere because I want to keep playing pickleball because I was inside all week and I don't love that.
No, I know. And this has been a bit of a thing for me too. We were just talking about this, but I had a lot of back pain, like welcome to the Middle Ages, right? Like really, really intense, like hip back pain. And I went for a massage on Wednesday and he's like, what are you doing? Like you're sitting at your computer for 12 hours a day with your leg crossed. No wonder you're getting this pain. He's like, can you go and walk outside more and just stop sitting at your, I'm like, there's a wake up call, right? And it's true. Like I need to get out into nature. I need to have a day off every week and
yes,
all
you do,
of
my
it.
dear.
And
Yeah.
getting more and more important that happens, right?
Yeah, and you can get one of these walking treadmills under your desk too, right?
Oh, maybe that's next level.
Yeah. If I was sitting that long, I would definitely do that. But I don't sit a lot. I'm just in a building a lot.
Well, we'll start with the standing desk and see how that goes. But, one of our future episodes is going to be about our bodies, right?
Yes, it is. We keep saying that. Our bodies, wellness, all of that in the Middle Ages. But today we're talking about dating.
Oh, yes.
And,
so
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I did some research. Adults age 65 and older are now the only age group in the US with a growing divorce rate. And for over 50s, the rate has been increasing. And today they're saying roughly 36% of people getting divorced are 50 years and older compared to 8.7% in 1990. So it's now known as the gray divorce. And I have a lot of theories of why that is, but I'll pause there and just see what you want to add to that.
Yeah, what I will say is I'm not surprised, right? And I think that this is going to be sort of the basis of our conversation today is why are we both not surprised? And why do we see such an increase in people our age, unconsciously uncoupling, let's say.
Yeah.
Let's say it
sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's conscious uncoupling. Sometimes there's still, a lot of bitterness that comes into the uncoupling piece of it. So I'd like to think it's conscious, but I know that it's not always.
I was just being facetious because of the term, but yes, their relationships are ending at quite a significantly increasing rate for our age and our demographic. And I have my theories, but I'm curious, maybe you can kick it off and tell me, what's going on? What do you think's going on?
Well, I think part of it is that we're all living longer. And so when we're 50 and 60, we're contemplating not just maybe another 10 years with a partner, but maybe another 20 or 30 years with a partner. And is that something I really want? So people in their 50s and 60s, because it can anticipate another 30 or 40 years of living. And do you want to live with this partner? And the stats are 36% over the age of 50. It's obviously equal men and women if we're looking at traditional relationships. But I think that women are more independent. Women aren't relying on men anymore. Women are finding their playgrounds, hopefully finding their playgroups, finding joy and happiness in relationships outside of the marital relationship, which is really good. I'm celebrating that. And I don't think at this point, men are as successful in doing that. So the women get to see, move on, access their joy, and the men are kind of left behind. And, we'll talk about our core values, but one of my core values is I want to be with a man who is super happy in life. I'm not there to make him happy. and he's not here to make me happy, but it's going to augment the happiness that's already present in me. And I feel like those discrepancies are starting to show up in the Middle Ages.
Yep. And I could talk about this for probably 2 hours, but we are this sort of straddle generation where our parents grew up with, like, it was just a given. Your job is to get married, have children, and that's what happens in your life.
Mhm.
Like that's
Mhm.
and women in their generation, their sole purpose, they had to get married. They had to get married. They had to rely on a husband. I mean, women couldn't even open a bank account without a husband until the 80s. Like,
Mhm. Maybe not the 80s, maybe the 60s.
it was the 80s. Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is surprising, because yeah, that's just
I remember
surprising.
reading that stat and going, holy smokes, I was born in 75. So you're telling
Mhm.
me that in my lifetime, women were not able to go and open a bank account without a husband or a
Mhm.
father.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
like, they are still in this generation where it was just nobody questioned it. It was just like, that's your path in life. You just get married, right? You just get married and you have kids and that's it. And I think like our parents' generation are they're now aware of the fact that there are other choices out there. It's still hard for them to process because that's what they grew up in. Now, our generation is starting to break from those what they've been taught as well. But I would hazard to say, and this might be controversial, but that I think men in our age group are having a crisis of confidence because they grew up being told that all they had to do was make money and
Mhm.
then they could find that's all that was their job, right? It was just make money and they'll find and someone will want to be with them. And
Yeah.
now that that's not the case, I think men in our generation are having a very difficult time because women are starting to demand more of engagement and like support, and you have to do more than just show up and pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
Because women are paying the bills too, and they're carrying all the emotional labor of the family, and so by the time their kids are grown, they're like, what am I even doing this for? And I will
Mhm.
admit I had that thought when I left is and this is I don't want to divulge into personal details or anything, but I remember having the thought like, if I'm doing all this stuff already, why don't I just do it on my own, right? And that's what I think a lot of women are getting to. Now,
Yeah.
I have a wonderful husband and I have a wonderful human being that I married, and so different story, but there is a very generational shift happening with women and men. And in some ways, I think they're going further apart. But
Mm.
I see like when all of these big social changes happen, it, there is a coming apart for a while until we figure out how to be together again. And until those rules are rebuilt, men need to help men understand what their new roles need to be in relationship because women can help them understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Gen Zs coming up are getting really good with that. And I think Gen Z divorce rates are quite a bit lower. And I look at the men's groups that are available out there and how important it is for men to learn from men. And men were so, in my experience of marriage, the men were so reliant on the women to be their social circle, to be their teachers, to be their coaches. And then the women are taking care of everything around the house. The women are making all the appointments. They're taking care of the kids. And my ex-husband did a lot of stuff as well, but there's still the brunt of it that fell on me, and the brunt of it fell on me financially as well. So when we were no longer together, it wasn't like I had a little bit more time. It's not like it was not like he was doing so much that it was taking things off my plate. And I feel like I had less financial burden in a way because I wasn't supporting him as well. Now, I do believe that men are confused a little bit more around in dating today. And I've been on a very, very few number of dates, really not too many. And the men that I've met, some of the men that I've met that have been quite a bit older, they're not happy and they're seeking someone to bring them their happiness. And that's the piece that I keep wanting to come back to because I've got this happiness bullshit detector. Just because you smile or just because you laugh a little bit, like I can really feel energy, right? Like I'm super intuitive that way. And so I can feel when someone is not happy, and I can appreciate all the hardships in life that have contributed to that. But at the end of the day, we talked about this last week. This was our full conversation. We are responsible for our own self-care, self-love, self-appreciation, and ultimately happiness. And what I'm hoping as we get into the conversation of dating is we can look at how do we bring that into our experiences of dating? How do we help people bring that into their experiences of dating so that they could feel like they're contributing to each other? And we just got a message from Tasha. Thank you so much. Men learn from men. Absolutely. I am such a strong advocate of men's group. I very likely will not date a man who isn't participating in a men's group, because I do not want to be the coach. I do not want to be the therapist. I want to be an empathic, compassionate listener, but I'm not here to teach them what other men need to teach them.
So interestingly, like Tasha's comment there, Tasha's husband Tasha and her husband model this, right? So I was at a big event in Florida last year, and Tasha's event, and her husband came in and actually was one of the presenters. And it wasn't about relationships or love or anything, but what I saw, or mother then, that's right. So what I saw with the two of them is, I know Tasha's done a ton of work on, before she got into another marriage, she wanted to be whole in herself. And I think there's a lot to learn from that, because they're like, I was single for 10 years after my marriage fell apart, because I was like, if I'm the common denominator here. And if I don't know myself, if I don't like myself, if I am not a whole person on my own, then I can't be a whole person with someone else. And I absolutely do not want a relationship with someone where we are codependent on each other. And we are, trying to fill some gap that the other has, right? And so I feel really, really strongly about that. And I also have, non-traditional views on relationships, but this whole concept of people being happy and okay on their own first is one I cannot over stress. And what I find is that women coming into this age group are like, no, please just let me be on my own for a little while. Like, they are super happy to have nobody needing them and touching them and wanting things from them. And they're like, please just give me my peace. I think men in this age when they become single, they rush to try and, find someone else to make them feel validated. There's a huge, and this is not men bashing or anything, but I actually have a lot of empathy for men at our age, because they're still trying to work through all of the conditioning that the patriarchy has provided for them. But men have a really hard time being on their own. They really do. Now, women do too, and there are lots of examples of that as well. But I think more than men, women are getting into, they're like, please just let me breathe for a minute. I am so okay being on my own right now. Men seek validation. They seek the connection, and they seek, like, there's all these stats. Men are happier married than women are. And, of course, everybody's going to have examples too, in the opposite direction. We can't paint anything with broad brushstrokes, but there are growing numbers of research out there that, to a great extent, has suggested that this is true. Now, the problem that we're having is that we're going in this direction, right? So women are like, no, I'm totally fine on my own. Please just leave me alone. And men are like, I need something. I need connection. I need, someone to fulfill me in that regard. And so I stayed on my own for 10 years. And what that allowed me to do was get really, really clear on who I am as a whole human being, and what it is that I want and what I won't accept. And I was, at this point in time, if you're going to be in my life, you better be like my gold standard, because I don't have time for it otherwise. But also, like, why do we want to constantly compromise? Like, why do we want to try and shoehorn somebody into our lives just so that we don't have to be alone?
Or take on a project.
Oh God,
which is often what happens. It happens. So I've been alone for 6 years. Prior to that, I had I was married to a man who was a wonderful man, and our first 5 or 6 years of our relationship was really fulfilling and felt balanced. It was rich until we went through some trauma together as a family, and things really derailed. And I was left having to pick up every single piece, and it just exhausted me. So at this point in my life, like, I am really content being alone. And I will have people say to me, why do you want to, like, what do you want in dating? You just want someone to go out for dinner with occasionally, right? Or to play pickleball or whatever. And it's like, no, I actually really want a relationship, because I've done so much personal development and spiritual growth practice and work that I know the next evolution of my growth will happen in relating. The next opportunity for me to heal some of the wounds, especially some of my attachment wounds and some of my core wounds, will happen. I'm aware of them, but I'm not really triggered in them right now because I'm not in relationship. That can only happen in relationship. So I actually look forward to relating in that way, but it means that I'm needing to call forward somebody who's super clear about their own personal growth and has done the work and know what their core wounds are and know how they show up and know how to repair. And just I call it a playground. It's like the playground of life. When we get to this point in our lives, I'll speak for myself. At this point in my life, I want to call in someone who can join me on the playground, and we can wrestle through a lot of these conditionings, a lot of these teachings, a lot of these wounds to be able to become better people. So I'd love to ask you, Steph, what are some of your core values for welcoming into relationships? Like, what do you look for? What's important to you?
I'll answer that question, but there was just one important thing I wanted to just comment on with what you just said, is that the goal here is not to be totally healed and perfect and, nothing else going on by the time you get into a relationship. It's to be conscious and aware. And then, I always knew that for me to heal in the ways that I needed to heal, that I would need to be with a securely attached person, because I'm very, I'm like this weird combination of anxious and avoidant.
Yeah.
I feel anxious and I act avoidant, but those are all learned behaviors from experiences. And so I need to be in a very safe place. Like, I need to be in a safe place. And what's been interesting is being in a relationship like that for the almost 2 years now. That is somebody who I can show up for, and I could say, here's one of my triggers. Here's one of the things I know about myself where I have a very, very hard time with this thing, and help me work through it. And he shows up and he's like, great, I want to work through this with you. I recognize that this is not you creating this on me. This is you saying, like, we just like to lay it on the table, and now it's our problem to sort of work through and be curious about. So as a result, I am now starting to heal some of those things by being in relationship with another person that shows up in a different way. And in some ways, those things were only ever going to heal by being in a safe relationship, because I needed to relearn that a relationship could be different, right? So again, the goal is not, it's like with any mindset stuff, the goal is not to have perfect thoughts. The goal is to know what to do with them when they come up and they're limiting, right? So,
and I just want to add as well, before we go on to the question, for anybody listening, healing doesn't mean that you are broken. Healing doesn't mean that you need to be fixed. Healing means that there are patterns of showing up, patterns of responding to the world, patterns of reacting to the world that were part of your echo of your conditioning. And our work isn't to try to heal it or to get rid of it or to fix it because you're not broken. Our work is to recognize it, to love it, to bring it into conversation with open communication in relating. So that becomes a value for me anyways, so that it doesn't take over my body. It doesn't show up and become weaponized in some way towards another. So I just want people to recognize that when we talk about healing, we're not saying anyone's broken. And healing, like, let's just say it's something we do till the day we die. And if we're lucky enough, we find ourselves in relationships where we can bring those wounded parts of ourselves to the surface and let them be loved, because very often they're sitting in dark shame.
Yep, 100%. So your question, what are some of the values what was your question? What are the values?
What are some of your core values that you would welcome, that are, let's call them non-negotiators in relating, in dating? Let's say non-negotiables in dating.
Okay. So for me, it is non-negotiable that I have emotional safety. And emotional safety is the result of like a very strong communicator. It is the
Mhm.
result of being someone who is patient and kind and can, you know, who has the self-awareness and the emotional intelligence to be able to um, not feel like they need. This has been my experience is that um, the men that I had been having dates with, they would almost feel like um, if they were to show up in that way, they were almost giving something up and that they wanted to hold back. So for me, emotional safety is about me being able to say something to someone and say, I feel this way. And then we work on it. Like we just look at it and we say, okay, great. How are we going to, figure that out?
So
Um,
someone who can hold the space for what you need to
yeah.
work through.
Yeah.
For sure.
I can't be smothered. That is my value. I like as much as, there's a very, you know, there's a very accepted, way of being in relationship for most of our society. And it's the old Christian values of being married and living with someone. I have no desire for that. So I don't think I could be with somebody that is so dependent on me that we need to be in each other's space all the time. So that was really important to me that someone could love me and show up for me and be totally committed without it having to be like we have to merge our lives together. Kindness is such an important piece for me, like the ability to show up in a really mature and just assume kindness first. That's really important to me. Independence and ambition is huge for me. Like you and I have been in a very unique position in that we have been the providers for our families
Mhm.
from day one. And
Mhm.
though I'm fine with that, I also recognize that I no longer want someone to be dependent, a grown adult to be dependent on me. Right. And that's for a lot of different reasons. It's not just for a financial reason. It is because I value ambition. I value trying. I value, um, you know, having responsibility for yourself. Like responsibility is a huge value for me. So that is like off the top of my head, I think those are sort of the top ones that come out, but I'm sure that there's a
Mm.
whole long list of other ones. So I would ask the question
Mhm.
back to you. What are
Yeah.
the values for you? And Tasha
Yeah.
says, when I met my husband, I'd gone as far as I could on my own growth. Yeah, totally. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when
Yeah.
I've said this before, I have heard people say, "Oh, you can't don't rely on someone else to make you whole." I'm like, "No, that's not what it's all about." The things that were remaining for me to grow in had to be done in relationship with someone else because
Mhm.
they were waiting to rewire experiences that I had had and make new truths for me. I
Yeah.
know Tasha and you have talked about this a lot, but that was, really, really huge for me to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my circle facilitation training in Amsterdam, one of the things that's always reminded is that we are wounded in relationships. So, whoever that other person is that provided the wounding, parents, siblings, society, teachers, whatever, we are wounded in relationships, and healing happens in relationships. And that's why I do circle work, because we create a relationship in the circle. But the greatest relationship, the greatest circle is that person that you can be intimate with and share everything with and know that they can hold it all without judgment, without weaponizing it back towards you, which actually happened to me in my last relationship. And that was really painful. Is that, and it's happened in a work relationship as well, where things that I vulnerably shared were weaponized towards me afterwards. And so I probably have a little bit of protection around that. So for me, having somebody that is able to be consistent is really important. And I don't mean they're texting me 20 times a day, because that's just, I just don't have space for that. But somebody who's consistent, somebody who's can have vulnerability without trauma dumping like all the time. Because I also feel like that's putting me in a position of being a coach or a therapist. Somebody who can hold space. This is super important for me. Grounded presence, embodied presence. Somebody who can be in their masculine presence, be able to continuously breathe, to hold the space, to allow for what comes through me to be held. and also has emotional intelligence. So there's a balance there between masculine and feminine energy. But I really am leaning towards more masculine presence at this point in my life. I've had two feminine partners. Feminine meaning that they're really intelligent with their emotions, but couldn't contain the emotions in a way that allowed them to express it like safely, right? There's a container that has to be built around the emotions. And otherwise, it just becomes a little bit of like toxic femininity, even coming from a masculine presence or a man. Integrity is really important for me. Honesty is really important. Creating safety. I think all of these things would create safety for me. And I'm also, I mentioned this earlier, somebody who's already happy in their lives. I don't want to be their source of happiness. Man, that's way too much responsibility. I've actually done that. And it's really, really hard. It just drains me. So I want somebody who already has a community, is happy in their community, is contributing. So there's not only a growth mindset, but there's also an opportunity to give back in some way. And I know that you have started on that journey, Steph, and I know that I've been doing that for a while too. And that servitude idea, especially for me, a lot of the people that I might be dating could be retired. And so if the retirement is all about play and pulling from your, retirement income, and there's no giving back to community, society, or the world, that's kind of a pass for me. I don't want to judge the person. It's just such a high value for me.
Yeah. And I don't know if Tasha's still listening, but Tasha's been a really, really important person in my life for a lot of different reasons, but also to help me understand how I get what I want. And this is a point that I want to actually really touch on for us, is that you are allowed to have a vision for a relationship or anything in your life that is non-standard, that is exactly what you want, and you're allowed to pursue that. I remember years ago, I've been single for 10 years or whatever, or had been single for 10 years. And, my girlfriend and I, we would talk about, we were both had been married and, had no intention to get married again. And I never really valued marriage anyway as an institution. But I used to say to her, like, what I want is to find this person that I fall completely in love with, and he falls completely in love with me. And we have this incredible commitment to each other, but we live our separate lives. Like, we live our own lives. We have our separate things and we do what we do. We come together at whatever times we do in whatever works for us on a cadence. We have incredible incredible experiences, adventures, and then we take those away and we go back to our lives and we function in our lives. Because what I always saw was that when people come together and they just consume each other and they feel like everything has to be built around each other, and that was our parents' generation, right? And they become miserable, and they become miserable because there's no space, there's no room to breathe, there's no room to be individuals. And if we don't feel like we're individuals, we feel we've lost our identity. How do we show up in relationship in a way that is like strong and calm and peaceful? And I also I need my space and my time. Like, that's just me. So that's what I wanted. And it's basically what I manifested. For many, many years, that is what it was for me. Like, that was truthfully, authentically. And there are people who say to me, oh, you're just scared of attachment, or you're avoidant. I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I considered that, but I just can't get behind that. Like, that truly is not me. Even, in the most ideal scenario, I still wouldn't want that. Like, it just really is not me. So we're allowed to want what we want, even if the rest of the world is saying, no, Christian values, get married. That's what you're supposed to do. Everybody's supposed to be in this very like by the book relationship. And I remember my parents saying to me once, oh, if you don't have kids, you're really missing out on something. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, there are people who just don't want kids. And that's okay, right? But that's just old conditioning. It's old. Yeah. So I just want to say, you have permission to want whatever you want. And as long as you're clear on that, and what you want is not coming from a place that's harmful to you or anyone else, then like, please be aware of that, and please be clear on that, because you deserve to have exactly what you want.
Yeah, and no judgment. I mean, everyone has permission to live their lives. I think, based on our conversation in the last podcast, is the risk of abandoning oneself when they don't live their truth, and that's the risk factor. So your truth is what you've just described, and you are living yourself completely through your truth. And I want a relationship. I want someone to go to bed with at night and to wake up with in the morning. And I also want to continue all the other really joyful things that I do in my life. So I don't want to take away from that. So in the meantime, I am just super patient and having fun and enjoying life. I'm
So
curious. Go ahead. Mhm.
I was, you had a question, but go ahead. And I would, then I'll ask
Yeah.
mine.
So my question is around, how are people accessing dating
I was
today?
just going to ask the same thing. That was my question too.
And I
So,
want to tell you something really, really interesting that I heard. I heard a little tidbit about Gen Zs. Now, this blew me away, and I have to research it. But a study found that Gen Zs have an 80% chance of being more in relationship with AI than with a person.
or
So let's
Gen
just,
X too. I have a
yeah, the
pretty
research I
strong
heard was Gen
relationship.
Z.
I have a
And
pretty
so
strong
that's
relationship
interesting,
with my
right?
AI, my little AI team. It is, in some ways, it's a bit of a slippery slope commentary, but I am very, very, very cautious of these fantastical stories that are like, "Oh, AI is gonna replace blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
You know what? Like, in some way, so here's one of the big myths and one of the big problems I think we've had in relationships and dating for the years is that we expect our partners to be everything to us. And
Mhm.
that's just not, like, that's not feasible, it's not realistic, and I think it puts
Mhm.
a really, like, undue pressure on the relationship to be this complete and fulfilling thing.
Yeah.
Um, and in some ways, I'm going to open a can of worms here, but in some ways, the concept of polyamory for me makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure logistically I could do it, and I do have a really close friend of mine who does it, and has a wonderful, has a marriage, and also has her needs fulfilled with other people, and like everybody's happy, right? But whatever your opinion is on that, I think, coming back to the concept of trying to put pressure, trying to have the expectation that one person is going to be all the things to you. Why can't one person be this to you and another person be that to you? And it's a little bit of a can of worms, but this is the other thing that I think we've shot ourselves in the foot with, is this expectation that we have these perfect partners that are going to be all the things. And I think that that's causing a lot of strain and resentment inside of relationships.
Yeah. I'll leave my personal opinions of different forms of relating out of the conversation, because I do have strong opinions in terms of personal work and therapy work that perhaps is avoided. But I'm going to just come to this comment on what you said, and I totally agree with you. This idea that one person is going to be everything. They're going to be your lover, they're going to be your provider, they're going to be your coach, they're going to be your therapist, they're going to be your driver, they're going to be your co-parent, they're going to be everything, and that's not healthy. And so again, we're going to come back to men need men, women need women. Somewhere in the middle, there could be some cross sharing in different activities and sports and in different playgrounds that we've talked about already. And I think that when it comes to dating, what I'd love to know is, where are people going on dates? Like, how are they finding their dates? So I know we have a strong online community for dating. I haven't particularly found that successful. Have you had any experience with that, Steph?
Oh, I've had experience with it, and I have opinions for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I actually think online dating has completely ruined it for us.
Mm,
It's become shopping for humans, and
yeah,
so we have turned human beings into data.
yeah,
And that the other problematic piece of online dating is that it is causing this, but there could be something better all
Mm.
the time, right?
Yeah.
So
The grass
we
is
nobody
always greener.
yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody really sort of dives in and commits to trying. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody you're gonna find is gonna be the one for you or that you should try and make them the one. But the this little subtle thing that there is always something else out there is, I think, causing a lot of people to disengage. And it's I don't know, I think it's been very, very detrimental to our the way that we relate to each other.
Yeah.
It hasn't been like particularly successful. You know what? I have actually made more long-term close friends from people I've met on the dating apps than I have found any successful partners. One of my best friends up here, we actually found each other on dating apps, and we never dated. We met each other once and then we just became like besties, and we've been really close friends for probably a decade now. But that's how we met. And I had another really close friend of mine, and then he unfortunately passed away. But we had met on a dating app, and we became really good friends. We ended up traveling down to South America together, and but I just think, like, yeah, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And I
Mm.
know a lot of people do meet each other on dating apps, and in some ways, there's a lot of convenience there. And I am,
Mhm.
I grew up in the technology world. I'm certainly not somebody who's anti-technology, but I do think it's become really damaging.
Yeah. I think there are, I'm going to agree with you. I think there are a lot of very successful relationships. My first husband met his new partner on a dating app and they're very happy together. And I think there's a lot of really great success in finding a healthy, balanced, great relationship. And there's so much struggle along the way. And I just look at things like vulnerability, like how vulnerable can I be when I don't know the person? And, I always call it, we're not going on a first date, because I've done a little bit of online dating as well. I don't call it a first date. I call it a first meet and greet. Like, do we even want to go on a date, be vulnerable enough to go on a date? Because
Your
to me, that's vulnerable.
energy, you can't
Hmm.
you cannot communicate. Like, how many times have you gone on a date from somebody that you met online, and you have this amazing back and forth, and then you meet and you're like, what in the world? Like, how is this the same person?
Yeah.
And the energy is just totally off. And then there's also the weirdos, right? Like, I
Yeah.
went on a
Yeah.
date with a guy and he started spitting on me, and I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Like, we've all had these weird experiences.
I've
And
never been
so,
spit on. I will tell you that. That's yours.
oh my God, I was just like, what are you doing, man? Anyway, and I
I
know,
went on a
yes,
date
I
with
know
a
lots
guy
of,
who wanted to move to Canada. And so
oh
it was
yes.
going to be his way to move to Canada. Yeah, from
I
the
met a
US.
guy
Like, I
I
don't
met a
blame you, buddy, but I'm
guy
not the lady.
I met a guy who was just traveling through our area, and he was from Kentucky.
Mhm.
And we've been friends for years now, and we just, like, every now and then pop in and shoot the shit with each other and back and forth. So, yeah, like, and so I think this is all about being really conscious of how
Yeah.
you are, like, relating to people, because
Yeah.
I think it can also, like, because of the volume and the like the habits and the mannerisms that have evolved through that kind of interface. I think
Mhm.
you have to be really clear on that, and you have to
Mhm.
understand that you're getting different. You can't apply the same expectations you have had from meeting people in person to the experiences that you have on dating apps. Like,
Yeah.
you have to be really clear of what you're dealing with. But
And I
let's
think you have to be
so
careful too. I think people have
yes, you
to
do.
be careful. And I
Yes,
think
you
it's
do.
important for people to know that when you do meet someone, let's say it's on a dating app, that first date is just to see if you want a second date. And I would call it the first meet and greet is to see if you want a first date. There's nothing else. Don't start planning the whole future, wondering how they're going to fit in with your family, wondering where you're going to go on your honeymoon. Like, you're just there to see if you want a second date. And the
That's right.
second date is there to see if you want a third date, and so on and so on. And I'm going to encourage people to ask one question when they're in the presence of one of these dates. And it's not, how do you feel about them? It's, how do you feel around them?
Mm. I
And
have
and
a
that's a big radar for me, is, how do I feel in the presence of the other? Am I authentic? Am I relaxed? Am I having fun? Am I feeling comfortable? Do I feel like I can trust this person? These are things that I'm feeling inside.
One of the things that tells me that my partner right now is such a great fit for me is that I become the person that I want to be when I'm
Mm,
around him.
yeah.
And it's funny, he said to me once, he's like, you have this relationship with so many other people in your life that is, it's almost like humorous abuse of each other. Like he's like your relationship with a lot of people is built on this like almost like incessant humor and like ribbing each other constantly. He's like, but you're never like that with me. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't even come out of me. Like there's this high level of respect. And I show up with him as the person that I would really like to be. And it just comes, it's very natural. Like I'm not forcing it. I'm just, it was curious to hear him say that because I was like, wow, I am a very different person around you than I am around a lot of other people. And I had to sort of think about that for a minute, but that is very true. Like
Mhm.
I'm reflecting kind of his energy. He's one of these like just really like super empathetic and lovely, kind human beings who's very curious. And I think that's great. Like that rubs off on me. And for whatever reason, I just show up in this version of myself that I really, really like. And so
And I
are
think
what
that speaks to authenticity, right? And that's so
mm,
important. And that doesn't always happen in dating. And I heard a quote. Let me see if I cannot butcher it. The quote was something about if you play games to get into a relationship, expect to have a relationship where you play games.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a real truth in relating and dating today. And so how can we bring out this authenticity from both partners? How can we create this space both for the men and the women or the whatever gender you're identifying with and you're relating with? How can you create the space for the other person to be fully authentic and not have expectations, but have really clear values of, okay, this is really important to me. I don't really think that that's going to work in my relating, but thank you so much. It means nothing about the other person. It just means that it's a high value for me and I want to move forward with someone who shares that value. So I love the idea that you're being held and given space, and accountability comes up, like opportunity maybe is more appropriate to be fully authentic.
Yeah, and I expect that he is a person who would like call me out on something if I was not in a way like a critical way, but more like,
Mhm,
hey, I noticed this. What was that all about? And then we get to talk about it, right? And I
mhm.
get to be kind of authentically who I am, even if it's, in a time of crisis where I maybe not behaving in the way that I would like to behave, but I can come back to it and I can say, okay, let me review this. So if we're not meeting on dating apps,
Mhm.
how are we meeting? How is dating look what does dating look like now?
Yeah, good question. Anybody have any ideas, please send them to us. There's the pickleball court and there's the dance floor. And there was a man who came up to me last week on the dance floor at the gondola and just said, I really like your vibe. And, that was it. It was just a quick comment. Ideally, people are introducing people. It's I think it's, you have to look at where your playgrounds are. There are a lot of people in the Middle Ages that may not be working. So work is no longer a place where you would meet people. So it's a good question. And I think a lot of people at all ages, by the way, struggle with where do I meet people? I have friends that are 25 to 75, and the single ones are all struggling with where do I meet people, and people wanting to have more organic opportunities to meet versus going on the dating apps. But then that's really like small. It's a small pool.
My best advice is to stop trying, right?
Yeah,
Because
I
the
agree.
the people I've met that I've just really, really loved are people who are, I think about a Venn diagram and I think about all of our overlapping worlds, right? And you actually never know when you're going to meet somebody. So if you're closed and you think you have to manufacture meeting someone,
Mhm,
you're going to show up with energy that is not attractive anyway. But
mhm.
like the person you're going to meet is going to be somebody that happened to be in line next to you at a grocery store and noticed something about you or you ended up in conversation, or it's going to be
Yeah,
a friend of a friend that is like, you guys really need to meet, or
yeah.
it's going to be somebody who shows up at the gym, or it's going to be, like Diana, you being in that energy while we're dancing, I mean, what a great place to meet somebody, because it's such like an authentic energy for you. And I think somewhere like that, you would be have a much better chance of finding somebody that you really vibe with, because they're, it's a very personal thing, right? I met my partner through our, work network, and you just never know, right? Like, you just never know. So when we're trying to manufacture it, I think that's when we run into trouble, because we get frustrated, and then we show up like, if I only showed up for pickleball because I wanted to meet somebody there, imagine like what kind of energy you're showing up with. So when we that like desperation energy comes when we have this idea that we have to be in relationship.
Yeah.
So I come back to this need to be super whole with yourself and very content on your own before you can show up outside of that desperation energy.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you stop seeing past things that are not in alignment with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you are, we said this on the last episode, you are whole and complete, and you need nothing to complete you. And if you do feel like you need something to complete you, go and do more personal work, go and do more spiritual work, go and figure out who you are, how you are, join your men's group, join your women's groups, find companionship in many different ways, so that what you bring to possible future relating is not filled with some kind of a leaky, unhealthy, unconscious need, but just a really strong openness to receive and to offer. And like, you're the receiving from another, but being able to offer to another as well. Otherwise, we're just needing, and that's never going to be healthy.
So logistical questions. So a lot of people our age have families. They have kids. They have, maybe their kids are a little bit older now, or maybe they're still in a younger age where there's some taking care of.
Yeah.
How do we start overlapping families, and how does dating work when we've got this, like, these two separate, needs going on? Because I think a lot of women have that sort of real maternal thing where they're like, oh, I'm going to hurt my kids if they see me with another man. I really, really like challenge that. I have never hid from my kids that I have dated somebody, but I think what we're modeling for them is what we do and don't accept in relationships. But I know other people might not agree with that. I think it's heartbreaking if you deny yourself the chance to be in relationship and be in love because you somehow think your kids are going to judge you.
Yeah. So first of all, I think my kids are teaching me more about relationships than I can ever teach them. I'm so impressed with their level of relating. And I choose not to really introduce anybody to them unless I feel it's somebody that is going to be contributing to our family moving forward. So if I have a couple of dates or I'm just hanging out with someone, I don't really introduce them to my family. They're not part of my family yet. But if I feel that and it has nothing to do with my kids, I don't feel like it's a betrayal to my kids. It's just not somebody that I necessarily see fitting into my family. And certainly unless it happens organically, like we all happen to be dancing and my kids are there, of course I'm going to introduce them. I feel like it's the integration of families is something that is important to consider. I will say that I am not interested in dating a man who has children that haven't finished high school yet or near finishing high school, because my kids are now flown and I'm at a different phase in my life. And I don't necessarily want to be, part-time parenting or part-time supporting someone who's parenting. And, I say all this stuff. And then I know the heart knows what the heart knows and the heart wants what the heart wants. And that might totally change, but that's it's not a non-negotiable for me, but it's kind of something I consider. And part of it is because it's much harder to integrate families when there's still younger ones at home.
Yeah, I had one of my really good friends go through this, and he had met somebody he really liked, but she had really young kids. Like we're talking like 6 and 3. And it was something they couldn't get past, because for him, his kids are graduated and and that sort of thing. And it was just too different, right? It was too different a lifestyle. And you're allowed to want that. And
Yeah.
he kept trying it again and again, but it was just too much. And so he has to just be really honest with himself that that's he's already gone through that, and now he's at a stage in his life where he lots of flexibility. And so it's not that he didn't like her. It's just that that was his preference, and that was a big non-negotiable. But for other people, it would be fine, right? So again, it comes back to being really clear on what you
Yeah.
want. But I also think that it can be challenging, especially also if we have partners who are ex-partners who are potentially contentious. And I've seen it where, ex partners do try to weaponize the relationship with the kids. And so all that stuff can get really tricky when you're dating at this age. And hello, Indy, dating at this, she knows how to open the door. And so
India is Steph's dog. I have a great example just with my first husband. His partner, he met her online. She's amazing. She's lovely. She has 2 kids. It turns out that her daughter and my son-in-law, my daughter's husband, went to high school together, so knew each other. And these 2 families they go on trips together 2 or 3 times a year sometimes. So she has 2 children. He has the 1 daughter and a husband, and they take trips together, and they get along so great, and it's enriched their family experience. So I do believe that for me at this age, and with my kids at the age that they are, I don't really think that's a big factor in considering, as long as the other person's children aren't a whole lot younger.
Yeah. And so you get to choose. Okay.
Yeah.
We're coming up on the top of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
What have we not talked about yet? I mean, I think we could probably do a 3-hour episode on this, but what have we not talked about yet that you think is super important?
So one of the things that I hear a lot from people talk a lot about texting and dating, right? A lot of people that are dating, that's the way that they date today, no matter what the age is, texting and dating. I'm not a big texter, but I'm also not really super comfortable with long telephone calls unless I'm really interested in someone. So I would much rather meet face to face. But the reality is texting is the way it's happening. And what happens is people get into what they call a dopamine loop. So when you're waiting for the text, you send a text and you're waiting, you see the text has been read, it creates a dopamine loop. And the other thing is texting has no tone. So we think we get to know people through texting, but we really don't. And then what happens after the dopamine loop is we get the text, the brain gets addicted to texting, it gets the dopamine loop waiting for the texting to happen. And then when the text comes in, serotonin gets released. And these are all chemicals that give us this false sense of happiness and safety and connection. And so I think for me, texting is something I'm really cautious about, because it's easy to believe that I know so much about the person because we've texted, but I don't think that it gives me the authentic experience as meeting someone face to face. So that's just my personal preference, is face to face. And I recognize texting is often the way it has to be.
Yeah, I think I have that experience, and our relationship is very much based on text, but we just love to talk to each other. So we have these long. But I think
but you're in a relationship now, so it's not the
Yeah.
dating phase. You're in the relationship phase. So I think it's very different in a relationship versus dating.
And we have had a lot of face-to-face interaction with each other. But I also think that the other problem for me is that my brain works on patterns. I'm sure I'm somewhere on the spectrum, but my brain works very, very much on patterns, and it's very analytical. And so when I'm in relationship with someone, and they sort of we establish sort of a communication cadence or pattern, when those patterns change, that becomes a huge panic moment for me, because in the past, a change in communication patterns has always meant there's a problem. And so that's the thing I struggle with texting, is that, I mean, if we didn't text with each other, we would have not gotten anywhere near where we are in terms of knowing each other. But if that is sort of the problem that I have with it, is that I try to infer things from the way that people communicate. And like, let's say he has a really busy day and I don't hear from him for 5 hours. By the end of that 5 hours, my brain is going, alert, alert, alert. There's a change in a pattern and something is wrong. Even though
Yeah.
logically,
Yeah.
even though logically I know it's not. And so I think
Well,
like
that's
there's
all,
these
that's core wounding, right? That's core wounding coming through. And that's the brain making an assumption about that it has something to do with you. And it probably has nothing to do with you, very
No.
likely has nothing to do with you. And it's no different when someone is ghosting. You know, ghosting isn't like we had a couple of text exchanges and we stopped texting. Like, that's not really ghosting. You weren't in a relationship. But when people feel ghosted, they often ruminate on, what did I do? What did I say? How could I have been doing something differently? And it's like, ladies, it's not about you. Don't make it about you. Don't make yourself so important in this situation that you believe it has something to you. This is just somebody who didn't jive with you, didn't have the same value judgments that you did, whatever. And you just get to move on and just say, thank you for showing me what's even more important. Consistency, communication, all those things. So I really think that's important to share as well.
Yep. I had a relationship 10 years ago that really, really did a number on me. And I don't even know why, because it wasn't like I'm a pretty confident person and I'm, not somebody who usually allows somebody to make me have judgments against myself. But I think it was just the perfect storm of coming out of my marriage. I was a couple of years out of my marriage and I still hadn't really figured out what was wrong with me or what I had done or what was going on or any of it. Right. And there's this person who I had put on a pedestal, right, who I thought was just this next level for me, and just this shitty behavior over and over and over again. And yet he continued to want to stay in this relationship with me and it was like 8 months or something like that. And we went on trips together, like all this stuff. And then just comes home from a trip and just stops, like completely ghosts.
Yeah.
Like, what? And, at first I was just angry and I'm like, and so I had to end it. And I was like, okay, that's a boundary for me. But what it had actually, like, it set me off on this really, really rough, about 6 months of this very, very, very critical, rough time.
Yeah.
Because I had built in my head that this was my last chance, that if I hadn't been able to make this work, then I wasn't cut out for dating and I just wasn't somebody that people fall in love with. And then the ghosting was like this real final sort of cut for me. But in a way, I almost have to thank him, because that was what finally put me into this journey of self-discovery and self-awareness and learning about myself and learning all the things and trying to figure out how I could end up so destroyed by somebody who had so little care for me and for like my well-being. So, the ghosting thing is just like a lazy, shitty, poorly behaved child of a adult that can't,
scared,
but is
scared, no courage,
yeah.
Can I tell you my quick ghosting story?
Yeah.
I'm really embarrassed about this. I've never shared it. It was so I was in my first marriage for 20 years, 17 to 37. And when I came out of that marriage, and it was more of a friendship than a real intimate marriage. And when I came out of that marriage, I, within a very short time, met a much younger man. And we went out a few times. We were intimate a few times. I thought we were getting along great. And then he ghosted me. And I am 37. I have not dated really ever. And so I'm like, what's going on here? We were together. We were hanging out. We were talking just yesterday. What's going on? Maybe he lost my number. I went so over the edge about trying to figure out what is going on here. And also thinking back, what have I done? What did it mean about me? And I eventually, after about 4 days, found his father's phone number and called his father's house during a Sunday dinner to talk to him, because I thought for sure, I didn't know that ghosting existed. I was so out of the loop. I thought for sure something must have happened to this man. And I was so concerned. I was now making it about something happened to him. He lost my number, something. And he said to me, and the best thing he could have said to me is like, this didn't mean anything to me. Like, don't call me again. It was so humiliating and humbling. And I learned that ghosting happens. And that was my first and only experience with it, to be honest. But lots of learning in that. So now everybody knows that's my ghosting experience. Shoot.
I love that. Okay, that's a great story for us to end on.
Yeah.
I feel like we could do a whole episode of like crazy dating stories because I
Yeah.
have had a few. For
I
sure.
don't have tons, though. I don't have a big dating history.
Yeah,
But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can think about it. So we're not
Yeah.
doing a live next week, friends.
No.
Those of you listening, thank
We
you
are.
to Pankush. Not next
Oh,
week.
no, you're away. Right. Okay.
I'm away.
Oh,
So thank you,
Yeah.
Pankush, for joining us. Thank you, Tasha, for joining us live. If you're watching and you didn't leave a message, feel free to leave us a message. Just say hi. It really helps us to know that somebody's listening out there in
Somebody's listening.
the
Don't
cyber
ghost
world,
us.
and we're making a difference, and you care about what we have to talk about. This was fun stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. And I just hope, from our silly conversations that there's some little nugget that somebody's going to take out of it and say, oh, that's a new shift for me.
Yeah.
And, we're learning about ourselves too as we're doing these episodes. So yeah, it's just been fun. Thanks for being with us. If you've been with us live, thank you for watching if you're watching after the fact. And we will see you on the next episode.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Middle Ages. If you loved this episode, follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone who's rewriting the rules of midlife too. Because around here, we believe midlife isn't the end of anything. It's the start of everything. See you next time.